Hello everybody, this is Easy Mode's Gerpums with my first Marine Arena tutorial cast, and essentially what this channel should be is guides on how to do strategies effectively. Now I'll probably highlight some of the normal strategies, like this one will be duskwings, though in this video I'll mainly be doing a tutorial. Now, what this is aimed at is what I'd say the average player, so like 25% win rate since it's a 4-team game. So if you're around there, you know the basics, you know the units, but I will give you some tips. And you might know these tips. These are things that you might have picked up in ladder or you might have just realized. Now, what these are is, I think, the two most effective things to learn in Marine Arena. And the most important, knowing these two things could drastically increase your win rate. If you have decent control, then you could easily raise above 25% to 40, etc. And then from there, it's continue to get better. What I'd suggest is start playing in pre-made teams from there with allies and etc. Now, what I would say the two most important things would be positioning and countering. Now, countering and positioning are very different. Now, countering you may already know, and positioning you may already know also, in which case this probably won't be that helpful, though there might be a couple things you might learn. Now, countering would be this right here. These mercenaries that you can either hit F4 or hit the DT shrine, etc. Now, you may have already noticed that zealots are armored and sharpshooters have a 15% damage bonus versus armor. So essentially, if you go sharpshooters, you're probably going to beat zealots in a head-on fight. That's not unfairly distributed, like you have 50 zealots versus 10 sharpshooters. But this is very important, especially later on, past the 10-minute mark. Now, it's important early on. Like, zealots will do awesome versus armor. But later on it's even better, because if you see a bunch of Goliaths or just other mechanical armored units, or mechanical light units, my bad, you want to go destroyers. Now destroyers have a bonus versus mechanical and light, which are both 15%, so a total of 30% damage bonus. Now that's extremely important. I mean, you could be behind by several $1,000s and still trade effectively later on because you do 30% more damage bonus. That's huge. Also, destroyers also have splash damage, which Goliaths are susceptible to, but now that starts with another key point. It would be, there are two types of countering. There's countering with tags, etc., like I just explained, how you would want to check this thing. This thing is like 99% accurate. I think it's entirely updated right now. It might not be later. Tooltips are annoying to update, but there are other things, like Goliaths. Goliaths may be countered by some air tag-wise. Like, I'm not sure exactly which one counters armored or mechanical, because they've just been the tags were changed around recently. But just because you do 15% damage versus the Goliaths doesn't mean you're going to win with air, because Goliaths have extra range and dual fire, which is huge. You can't go melee and air and just have them target the melee, and the air will just deal out the damage. Now, dual fire is huge, but the extra range is even better because you can hit them before they get to you, even better. All ground range actually have more range than any air does, but with the extra 0.5 range is huge. Now also, they have large splash damage, which is key versus air, because air tends to stack up. You've noticed this, that all 800 of the fly can attack at once, which is a good and a bad thing. You can deal huge damage to single targets with that, but you can also get huge damage dealt to you by something like a Infestor or Goliath. Now, the splash damage is extremely effective versus them, but that brings us into another key point, which is positioning. Now positioning we'll get to later with air, because that will probably be one of my tutorials, but positioning is huge. Like, you see, I was stuck in a concave, it's called. The concave is essentially the inner side of the circle. I was stuck in a concave versus those immortals. Now, it didn't matter quite so much because my duskwings are extremely powerful at this point, and I'm already been fed way up past the marauders, but what that means is more units firing per their units. Now see, here I am again. Now, I didn't want to walk down that ramp versus a bunch of marauders attacking me, because they would have, say, 50 marauders attacking me versus my 10 sharpshooters. And that's bad. I mean, they're doing 4 times the damage. That's huge, really. And it could be to a smaller degree. I mean, later on, if people are attacking your base, you're going to have like 100 units firing instead of just 50, but they might have 110 units firing, and that's all it takes. It's close enough. Now, this is what makes positioning so key. Now what I'm trying to do here with my positioning is run away from the AFK guys' units and kill a DT that's roaming around. But what you want to do, see here, I'm stutter stepping in. Now that's another thing. His units are very far behind, and I have more than he does, and melee are tanking for me. Basically, they're just taking damage for me, so my units aren't even being targeted. Now what I do then is just stutter step my units in, which is to click forward and then A move or hit S, whatever, so that your units stop. So they stop and attack, and then walk forward and stop and attack, so you get more lines firing. Now, back to the countering subject, I just went Immortals versus Hydralisks, Marauders, and Reavers, I believe. Now, the only thing on this field that counters me are Temple Thoughts. Now, Immortals counter everything there tag-wise except for Temple Thoughts. But also, Reavers, since they tend to stack damage, and Immortals have a very low fire rate, but a very high damage, means they do even better versus Reavers, even if they didn't have the bonus versus Massive. That's a mechanical counter along with a tag counter, which makes Immortals extremely good versus Reavers. Now, countering is key. In this game, not only do I position myself effectively so that I can get the feed and also use my duskwings to kill tons of Marines. Let's check the kills on that, actually. 260 and 289. So that's huge. That's several $100s because they're not only killing Marines. That's several $100. You know, the positioning with them is very different than what you want to do with melee. For example, I'm harassing with them because they outrange them. Now that's what you kind of do with air, is something that's running away, you harass them. If it can't engage you in a wide area like a giant ball of destroyers versus your small ball of mutalisks, for example, you would want to attack them while they're on a cliff or something like that. That's harassing. Now there's other positioning for melee. Melee has hugely different positioning. Melee works based on the surface area it has. So basically, the amount of units attacking is huge compared to their units, but since melee always come in range, they tend to be more powerful in one-on-one, so basically you don't even need to worry about the whole stutter stepping in versus a larger army being a bad idea, because melee you just want to get a surround. The more units you have firing, the better with melee. So if you're attacking in this small choke point where these Marines are with a giant ball of 800 supply of Reavers versus my ball of Immortals, you're going to get destroyed because only a couple of your Reavers are attacking at any given time. Now, what's really good for this is something like Cracklings. You could draw a box around some of the Cracklings that aren't firing and bring them up behind. You could surround a fleeing army because Cracklings are very fast. Or with Warp Zealots, you can gather a lot of mass. You always want to have mass with Warp Zealots. And A-click the back unit in somebody's army. Now what that does is it means the first Warp Zealots blink around and basically kill that unit, and all of yours get a perfect surround on them. Now, this can be done with all melee. For example, Reavers have the advantage of having push, so they can push into things. They can just push into a giant ball. It's not very effective against Immortals because they counter them. But he can push into an army of, say, these Marines, which just get destroyed, and use their Cleave Splash attack to deal massive damage versus Marines, which they armor cap because you stack armor on them. Now, armor is another interesting thing. Now, that brings us into synergy, because armor requires you to synergize your upgrade. Now what that means is every upgrade gives a half of an upgrade to other upgrades. Now that sounds kind of weird, but if you get a Marine attack, it will give a half of a hero attack to your hero and a half of a mercenary attack to your mercenaries. That's extremely important late game. I think I start doing that right after this battle, because I believe at 11 attack upgrades, your next upgrade costs 525, or maybe it's just 500. In any case, the next Marine attack and hero attack are 225, which basically is cheaper to get one of those than to get another mercenary attack. And that's kind of weird that you would want to get a hero attack to improve your mercenaries, but it's true. Now what I was leading on to with armor is that armor scales at $50 per upgrade. So if you're stacking armor, it's going to cost a lot more. Now, it also is very effective against things like Marines or Cracklings that fire very fast and have low damage. But what you need to do with them is always get synergy ups. So I don't even think it may take like 6 upgrades in armor to get to the point where it's cheaper to get a Marine and a hero of armor. Now later on, when you want to have 25 armor at like 50 minutes in game time, that's huge. Getting those is, you can have several armor difference and armor cap their Marines. it's a big deal. Early on, it doesn't mean much, though. Like, if you're stacking attack on your Marines, and your Zerglings have a base damage of 7, the Zerglings are still going to be falling off of the other people's Zerglings who are stacking attack. But later on, knowing this can be huge, because if you're just going straight Mercenary and you've got 25 attack on your Immortals or something, no, don't do that, because Marines scale best late game, not early game. But, if you're doing that, you always want to get some Mercenary, or some Marine attacks, and some Hero attacks, etc. Same goes for health. Health is also big, but people tend to stack it less. Now, what I was saying earlier was, or just a couple seconds ago, was how if you're stacking your upgrades, you always want to go Marines eventually, because Marines, what they do is, they have percentage bonus scaling, like the percentage boost attack and the percentage base attack, attack speed, and just attack, from the center stops, which if you don't ever go Marines right here, it's also where the hero upgrades are, which would be over in the X section right here. And so, what those would do for you is basically, once you have enough upgrades to unlock them, your Marines will outscale even Reaver armor, because they will have such a high boosted attack, and plus the plus 20% damage from the minor up basically counteracts the plus 1.25 armor. Now, basically, if you're in a 2-hour game and you don't have Marines, you're going to lose if they have Marines. Marines are key late game. That's why it's called Marine Arena. Some people complain if you go Hero, this is not Hero Arena. Well, later on, when you have Blink Marines, your Blink Marines are going to absolutely destroy that hero. Especially another thing that if you think you can, get a Overseer. Overseers have the stun, which a lot of people don't know. I've teamed with plenty of public game players, and they're like, wait, how did you stun that? The E, the Contaminate, will stun any hero or unit, elites, whatever. Okay, that brings me to another thing. Countering elites and heroes is also simple. Corruptors versus air and Viking versus air elites. Commandos and ghosts versus heroes. And specters versus whole new heroes. Also Phoenix. I forgot about Phoenix, but Phoenix is kind of underpowered. That basically concludes it. So now you understand Synergy, which is one of the least known, one of these. Also Positioning and Countering, which you may have learned if you play Ladder before Marine Arena. If you just know these few things, you can easily raise your win rate above 25% just by... Also, another huge thing, how to get good is to play people better than you. And play with people better than you. Go join the Marine Arena chat group and ask for games before just joining a lobby. So, if you combine all 5 of these tips, like Immortals countering, positioning your units effectively in a concave, and microing well and synergizing units, you can easily win games against just public players. Anyways, thanks for watching. I think that's everything. Bye.